What's up everybody, Couch Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video, and in this video we gotta talk about some really interesting and maybe concerning statistics about the Vandal versus the Phantom. We have new data from Champions Istanbul, and we can see which weapon is reigning supreme right now, and should there be anything done about it? There's a lot we gotta break down and talk about, but if you wanna get God tier aim, we got aim drills, tips, tricks, weapon guides, and everything you need in order to build up that godlike aim like many of your favorite pro players, including VOD reviews that are gonna showcase exactly how to take duels and win gunfights. So if you want to improve and you wanna climb the ranks, look no further than the GameLeap website right now in the description down below. Now, the Phantom versus Vandal debate has been basically around since the inception of Valorant. When you put in two guns that are similar in price, similar in lethality, however, with very key differences, and then leave it up to the user to decide which weapon they prefer in what situation, then of course debates will be raised. And for a long time, the Phantom reigned supreme in pick rate both in ranked and pro play, and of course with some balance changes here and there, eventually things got more balanced towards the center. And it stayed that way for quite some time, with both these weapons having strengths and weaknesses, where the Phantom worked a lot better when you were getting value out of spraying more. You were getting more value out of spraying through smoke, so controllers typically preferred it, while the Vandal got more value off of agents that wanted to isolate an angle and take a very specific gunfight, and because of its one-tap nature, it was used on longer range maps, and it stayed about 50-50, pretty balanced for a while, but at last Masters Copenhagen, things started to change quite a bit, with the Vandal pulling way ahead of the Phantom dropping to just about 20% pick rate, to the Vandal that was at 40% pick rate, or just below 40% pick rate. So out of nowhere, the Vandal just basically has doubled the Phantom pick rate, and that was just really like, whoa, wow, the Vandal is being preferred at the pro level, far outreaching the Phantom, which hasn't always been the case. I know some of you are gonna bring up the argument, well, okay, well, the Vandal is a weapon that's gonna favor people that have really precise aim, and it's gonna favor pro players over like the regular audience of players, but that has not always been the case. And it's something that is more of a recent development over time, whether it's the introduction of new agents like Chamber that have propelled this change, or the introduction of long-range maps like Breeze that have also propelled this change. Those are things that could have impacted the weapon, but it also could be just players adapting to the skill ceiling of the Vandal overall, meaning as the ceiling skill gets better, the gun skill ceiling gets better, the Vandal becomes slightly more favored. At least that's an ongoing theory. Now with Champions Istanbul finally here, and we're getting to see a ton of matches with many of the top teams in the world in varied regions, we're seeing something even more interesting, where the Phantom actually went down in pick rate, not up. Now the Phantom is sitting at about a 15.4% pick rate to the Vandal's 44.6% pick rate. That is absolutely insane. The Vandal is being favored almost 3-1 compared to the Phantom, which is just completely ridiculous, to the point where you're wondering if there's an imbalance in these weapons. Now, before we discuss that idea, let's make it known that there are many pro players that are very adamant about using the Phantom. They like the Phantom, they appreciate it, and they want to use it very often. And there's an ongoing debate with players at the pro level talking about Phantom versus Vandal. And if you're a pro player that is adamant about using the Phantom, and you achieve success with the weapon, it doesn't matter balance or no balance. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. If you're successful, you're successful, right? At the end of the day, that's all that matters. But it is interesting when a giant majority of the population at the pro level are choosing the Vandal, and it gets even more interesting when we look at agent stats, because you think, okay, well, obviously, you know, with Initiator's meta, and Initiators want to take some of these duels and duelists and Chamber meta, all these characters meta, it makes sense that the Vandal would be more preferred because these characters are played more than controllers, and controllers are the ones that want to use the Phantom. Controllers like Viper, controllers like Astra, these are the characters that want to use a Phantom, spray through smokes because there's no tracer, and these characters aren't played as much relative to the combination of duelists and initiators. But there's a problem with that idea, and the problem is even among controllers, the Vandal is being picked. The Vandal is more preferred as a weapon. Look at the stats here. We can look at the stats of every single agent, and I mean all of them, including Viper, including Omen, including Astra. All of them have the Vandal as the most preferred and most picked weapon. Now, it is important to understand that it is closer with controllers, right? While a character like Chamber would have a huge discrepancy where like almost 100% of the players are using the Vandal, right? A character like Viper is something closer to 65%. So it's still being preferred. The Vandal is still being far preferred, but it's not that overwhelming majority that Chamber has, for instance. But still, when you think about these characters that are supposed to on paper favor the Phantom, and the vast majority of them are still choosing the Vandal, that is a little bit of a sign for alarm, at least at the pro level. Now, it gets kind of tricky when a lot of this could be due to map design. Let's take Pearl, for instance. While there are many parts of the map on Pearl that seems like it would favor the Phantom, when you look at B site, the long-range potential duels there make it so Vandal is going to be a necessity in a lot of situations. If there was far less longer sightlines, weapons like the Operator and the Vandal would probably take a hit in their pick rate. And if maps keep coming out that, favor these long sightlines or have these really long sightlines, the Vandal is probably gonna keep increasing in pick rate overall. There's also a discussion to be had about pro play versus just your average ranked play. The Phantom is a much more forgiving weapon, and for the vast majority of ranks, the weapons are more balanced in their impact, and the difference with these weapons are actually so tiny that it doesn't matter which one you prefer or use. You can climb all the way to the highest ranks in the game, all the way to rank 1 in the game, all the way to the top of the pro scene in the game with either weapon. So is the balance really that far away to make it a big deal? And then the third question that you have to ask yourself is, does it even matter if these weapons are perfectly balanced, and what is that metric? So you could hypothetically try to adjust the numbers of these weapons, buff the Phantom if you wanted to slightly, maybe give it a couple more bullets in the mag, whatever you wanted to do from a developer's point of view to make it so these weapons are 50-50 in pro play. But then any additional map, any change to balance, any just random thing could happen that could further move these weapons. And it doesn't really make sense to have weapons that are constantly changing, weapons that are not consistent in the way that they feel. And I think that for the most part, these weapons are balanced enough to where even if the Vandal becomes the more preferred weapon overall, it doesn't really make that much sense to actually change the Phantom in any meaningful way, and things are fine as is. Now, with all that being said, what does this all mean for you? The pros are preferring the Vandal. Doesn't matter what character they're playing, doesn't matter what agent they're playing, doesn't matter what map they're playing on. The vast majority of them are preferring the Vandal. So what does that mean for you as an individual? The reality of the situation is, for the most part, it is not gonna matter. If you get competent at your weapon of choice, it's not going to dramatically change how much impact you can get, as long as you're adapting your playstyle to your weapon, realizing the strengths and weaknesses of your gun. If you're rocking the Phantom, maybe don't try to challenge every single long-range angle. Use your utility and information to get closer to the enemy and engage in more scrappy fights that, have a combination of swinging, have a combination of spray and spray control, and spraying through smokes using the fact that the tracer rounds don't track. These type of things are things that you can, play for, and you can get a ton of value on the Phantom. And this goes actually even further. In many ways, the Phantom is going to get more value on average because a lot of these type of things require game sense to set up, while a lot of the Vandal strengths require more mechanical skill to set up. So while all pro players have the mechanical skill to access what is needed to get out of the Vandal, right? Not necessarily true for every single player. And while everyone has an ongoing development of their mechanical skill, you can make clear decisions from one game to the next on the Phantom that is going to get you value right then and there. Doesn't require the many hours it takes to develop better mechanical skill. And the last thing that we need to talk about is the top-down approach to balance versus the average approach to balance. So these are two different mentalities when it comes to development. The first one is taking whatever the pro meta is, whatever the meta is at the top of the food chain, and you apply a balancing system to the agents, to the maps, to whatever, to the weapons, and then the rest of the population learn from the top down, right? They copy what the pros do, they learn the meta from the pros, and everyone's trying to emulate the top and everything's bounced towards the top. This is a more competitive approach and typically is what is done for highly competitive esports games like Valorant, if I'm being honest. But it can lead to some problems where you bounce everything for the top level, but then there's a huge imbalance lower down where, you know, some sort of discipline, some level of mechanical skill, some amount of punish is not there to actually make it anywhere similar to what the pros are doing. That would be the case of the Phantom versus the Vandal, where the Phantom and Vandal are more balanced in the lower ranks, but when we're talking about pro play, the Vandal is obviously better. I mean, in the numbers point of view, it statistically is picked more, even if there are situations where the Phantom thrives. So you could end up in a scenario where, let's say hypothetically, you buff the Phantom to the point where it is matching the Vandal in pick rate. Now all of a sudden, the Phantom is way overpowered in the low ranks. You could also do the same thing where, let's say right now, they're like, hey, Reyna doesn't see a lot of play in pro play. Let's buff Reyna to where she's a viable duelist in pro play. When she's already the most picked duelist in ranked play, out of nowhere, Reyna would be just unstoppable. So that's just some things you got to consider and think about when it comes to balance, that it doesn't always make sense to bounce from the top down, even if that is your go-to strategy. There are certain exceptions, and there's also certain ways that you can, you know, wiggle things around as far as skill ceilings and things like that, where you can balance things that only affect really a certain percentage of the population very strategically. That requires people that are way fucking smarter than me to figure out, but you know, the Riot devs got that covered. Now lastly, what is my personal take on this? Well, as someone who primarily uses the Phantom, I do think it's important to also know how to use the Vandal. You never know when you're gonna pick that up. You never know when you're gonna kill someone, get a Vandal that you have to use. So you should practice both guns, even if I do prefer the Phantom overall. And I also think that there are many things about the Phantom that are way more forgiving for someone like me who maybe doesn't have god tier mechanical skill. You can fire a lot more and faster on the Phantom, as in you don't have to be as patient, you don't have to be as bursty, and you don't have to be as precise. And I prefer to decide a lot of the games that I win and lose based on my decision making rather than, you know, trying to put a little bit more power into purely my mechanical skill. Do I think the Phantom should be buffed in any meaningful way? Probably not. I don't think that it would really hurt the weapon to get a tiny buff, you know, a little bit more bullets or, you know, something. I don't even know what it would be, but something very tiny. But I also think that that's completely unnecessary. And the guns are still in the realm of balance for the majority of people that play this game, that I don't think it's that big of a deal. Plus, in many ways, the Vandal is still a very fun weapon to watch at the pro level. I think that it really showcases a lot of pros' mechanical skill in a really cool way. And if the pro meta is more Vandal focused, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing from a viewer's perspective, from an esports perspective. So I think things are just fine how they are. But I really want to pass the question off to you. Now that you know the numbers, the stats, and interesting things about the Vandal versus the Phantom debate, how would you go forward? Do you think these weapons are perfectly fine? Would you balance them in some way? Are you shocked that even controllers like Viper and Omen still prefer the Vandal? Let me know how you will feel about all this in the comments down below. But the GameLeap website is the best place to pop off dominate with tips, tricks, guides, and everything you possibly need in order to climb the ladder. We have so many high quality guides and content that you won't find anything else like it, so you gotta go check it out right now in the description down below.